Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Monaco.
And I'm Bobby Salvesen. We are the HazMat guys, bringing you knowledge and insight to make your job a little bit easier and safer.
Let's take a minute to hear about today's sponsors.
Hey, have you heard about the Decon Field Guide?
Oh, yeah. The First Line Technologies, the DFG, has everything that I'm looking for in the field of emerging threats.
Yeah, the DFG has a brand new look with updated time-saving resources such as instructional videos, guidance documents, dwell timings, FAQs, even a ton more than that.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I've already been using the guide documents and the instructional videos on a bunch of classes that we're teaching throughout the country.
Yeah, so simply download the Decon Field Guide app to your smartphone or tablet to access the full threat library, step-by-step instructions, and instructional videos. Download the Decon Field Guide app today. You can find it on the Apple App Store or Google Play.
Let's get to the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the HazMat Guys. I'm Bobby Salvesen, and I'm with Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bobby. What's going on?
Oh, nothing. Nothing at all, actually. It's a little odd because it's the daytime.
Yes, I
We
have
usually don't do daytime.
sunlight coming through my window, and that's strange.
It is odd. It is a little odd. But I'm still hearing that the conferences are on.
The two that we've been talking about.
Yeah, Cold
in
Zone and
September and
Massachusetts.
October.
Yes.
That would be good.
So that's good stuff. That's good stuff with that. And there's a whole bunch of new courses. Oh my God, I gotta put up like 2 more courses that just came in.
The list. That's what I've been doing all day today. I've been recording for a COVID course.
Ooh, that's good stuff. That should be good stuff. Everybody needs to know about that.
A little bit of COVID in my life. Not that we're not all just totally just done with it, but apparently
Right.
the rest of the country wanted to experience what New York went through. So, you know, what New York does, everybody else follows.
Right. Well, the topic for today is we went over last week the new guys sign off.
Yes.
Right? The whole process
of
that.
The philosophy of it.
The philosophy, that's a better term, yes. And now comes the actual action of it, I would think. That's kind of more where we're going now, right?
Yes. And this one sign-off for one of our new guys sparked a little bit of controversy and debate. So I wanted to kind of throw it out there and just kind of digest, the reasons for it and whether or not one guy's argument was valid or another guy's argument was valid. So here was the basic the basic question. In our company, we require each person to be a technician coming into the company, and then they get qualified on every single piece of equipment that we have.
And techniques.
Right. So it's not just how do I use this meter, it's how do I use this meter properly. Like I can turn it on. All right, now how do I actually function this thing?
Right.
And the process can really take anywhere from like 6 months if you're a real go-getter to about a year. Right. And some people get signed off every tour, once they kind of get moving and they get into the groove. So the debate started when one of the new guys was going to get signed off on the chlorine A kit. Okay. And in the chlorine A kit, we require them to do it in PPE. So they don't do it in bunker gear. They're not doing it in Tyvek. Of course, they're doing it in level A. And it was extraordinarily hot that day. And we didn't make them do that sign-off. That's what they chose. So the debate became whether or not we should qualify a person on the piece of equipment while wearing the PPE. And the argument was they're not getting signed off on the PPE. They already got signed off on a level A. So why are we making them get dressed and go through the kit, which is what they're being signed off on, in the level A? So it was kind of one of those like, all right, let's hash this out. Let's get all the thoughts out there, like that HazMat huddle.
Yes. Well, what side of the fence do you fall on? Do you think the whole? It's like the ensemble. I think if you're not wearing the gloves and the boots and everything like that, then you're not wearing the full suit.
Right. I think there's a time and a place for signing somebody off in PPE. Not everything. Like when we do the the 5-gas meter or the 4-gas meter or the PID, right? We're not requiring them to wear bunker gear while they're doing it, or Tyvek while we're doing it. But there are, in my opinion, there are just fundamental things that go hand in hand, right? Because I could be wearing a Tyvek and use my 5-star, five gas. I could be using a level B and use my 5-gas. I could be in a level A and use my 5-gas. So,
Right.
But if with the chlorine kit, I'm pretty much only using a level A.
Yes. Yeah, you're not. It's either A or shorts and flip flops.
Right.
Because I think we've said this many a time. I'm very against people assuming a level of protection based on a chemical. I can modify the environment to make. I can make a chlorine leak shorts and flip flops if you give me a stack of fans.
Right.
And I put it behind me and it pulls everything away from me. So there are modifications to that. I've heard of people, let's say in Florida, and I'm not saying Florida does this, I'm just saying a hotter locale, they would cut a level A, an older level A, and just have them wear the sleeves.
Or the
upper part.
You're mimicking the dexterity.
Right, and that's where it comes down to is are you testing the person on the application of the chlorine A kit in this case, or are you testing their application of it under normal situations, which will quote unquote normal situation, let's call it, in that suit?
I think as best as possible, the two really go hand in hand, because I don't think you can properly use like specifically a chlorine A kit and not be trying to use it in the proper PPE because of the dexterity.
Right. And that isolation and that, the communication issues, all that stuff.
All that stuff. The communication is huge. I mean, like it or not, you're performing this function in a certain environment, so you should be trained off in that environment. Other pieces of equipment, we don't necessarily, the environment could change and fluctuate, right? So we hope that your level of training in the PPE is sufficient, and we hope that you understand the equipment. And if you happen to have to put them together, then we hope the two trainings come together. But
all right, let me throw this out. What if we did? What if I was to throw you? All right, listen. I want them to get signed off in level A, and in the chlorine A, and then the actual technique of the application in suit, and making this a 3-part thing. I don't even care if the guy gets in a suit and we do, a chlorine A, we do the chlorine B, you do like a round robin, and he gets 3 sign-offs at one time. Do you think it's because we don't have that. We don't have that, this will be together. And I think that's a clarity thing that we have to work on in-house, is that it doesn't say that you need to wear the suit.
Oh, no, it does. It actually says right across the top, chlorine A kit in PPE.
Oh, it does say in PPE.
It
okay,
absolutely does. Yep.
So,
yes. So I was like, I think you should at least run through the basic scenario in the level A, because you're dealing with all the tools, like that entire kit. Like you said, man, that ensemble is almost part of that kit, right? You would almost never use a level A kit, a level B, a level C, without using a level A, without having that total loss of dexterity. Because how do you know somebody is really proficient at the kit unless they're doing it in a scene where they have limited senses? They're overheated, they're stressed. Like, that's when they're using it. So shouldn't it be that's the best way to know whether or not they are proficient with that skill in that kit?
I don't disagree with that. And that in that situation, in that piece of equipment, I think, because I'm not going to tell you ever that it's always anybody. I think I've said this before on the show, is anybody in the fire service or any service for that matter that tells you always or never, they're always full of shit.
Right.
Every single time. Right. So there is always an exception to the rule. The likelihood, the statistic probability is that you will be in that suit. And so you should train on that kit in that suit. But like you said, that's, I'm probably going to be wearing bunker gear SCBA when I'm using my meters. However, we don't do that.
Right, because we're not actually performing. So what function would you be performing with the meter in bunker gear that would change with
Nothing.
the meter not in bunker? Nothing. You're
Nothing.
literally holding it and walking it around. I can turn it on outside. I turn it off outside. I'm scrolling through my menu outside. Like all of my button pushing, or most of my button pushing, is not being done inside the survey area. So I don't actually need to have anything.
Right.
Whereas when I'm using that level A kit, I'm actually performing dexterity stuff in the PPE in the zone. So
Yes.
that was kind of my argument as to where that differs. It's like, all right, well, but I'm not doing anything with the meter other than walking around. And if you really want me to walk around in bunker gear and go up and down and middle and, walk slowly, I can do that. But I'm fairly certain that at this point in time, walking slowly through a room and bringing the meter up, down, left, and right is not dependent on what I'm wearing.
I would agree. I would agree on that, yeah.
So I don't know. If let us know what you guys think as far as that concerns. And then the second question kind of rolls into that. Because we're doing a chlorine kit, and this is one of the few that is scenario driven in the firehouse. Most of the other sign-offs that we do are very much like give us information. For example, if somebody's doing an FTIR, they'll take out the FTIR. They'll perform the running the samples, right, the operations and all that stuff, and they're doing it not in PPE. But again, I don't know how critical difference in wearing latex gloves or Solvex gloves or butyl gloves is going to be in pushing the button. So, but anyway, so the next part of the debate comes in the form of a scenario. All right. And when we do sign-offs on pieces of equipment, specifically the chlorine kits, we will create a scenario. And they have to walk through that scenario, right? We don't just plop them down and say, okay, put the bonnet on. Let me see you put the bonnet on. I will tell them, okay, you have a leaking chlorine cylinder in a facility, go. And I will fail them if they don't bring in ammonia to try to find the leak, if they're not confirming that it's a chlorine leak with their single gas meters, and if they're not testing to see if that is the cylinder that is actually leaking, or even where the leak is. If they just walk in and they throw the bonnet on, I go, oh, I failed you. It was a hole in the sidewall.
Right, you didn't even check for that.
You didn't even check. Now, those pieces of equipment are not part of the kit, but in order to operate the kit properly, those preliminary things have to be done.
Right. It's like doing a size up. You have to look around the entire house before you figure out where the fire is.
And I was given pushback on a few guys for that. Oh, that's not right. That's not them. That's not us making sure they know the kit. That is not the kit. The kit is the kit. You just threw a scenario in there. And operating with the kit is different than functionally knowing the kit.
I agree with you.
Yeah?
I don't... honestly, I do because, well...
I wasn't even able to think of a good argument against not doing it. Like, why if... And my reason was, well, they applied the kit wrong because they didn't stop the leak. That was ultimately what it came down to. I said, well, they didn't apply the kit correctly because the leak didn't stop, because they didn't find out where the leak was.
Right. And you, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you probably had a pure thought in your mind, where I've been to scenarios and we've had these instructors where they're like, oh, it now has 6,000 pounds against it. It's like you're moving the goalpost here, man.
Right. No,
like they change scenarios.
I never move the goalpost. All right. The only thing I will do is if they don't check to see where the leak is, they failed because the leak was in a different spot. Like, because obviously, listen, right? We're using dummy cylinders. There's no actual leak, so you at least have to, let us know that this is how you would find the leak. And then once you found the leak, then you can walk through all the process. But I feel like when you're dealing with a chlorine kit or any leak seal kit, finding the leak becomes part of that kit because you can't do the kit right if you don't have the knowledge as to where the leak is. Or if that's even that product, right? So you don't walk in and you don't confirm with your own meter. Well, I could now be throwing something that is not compatible. Hey, it's a green cylinder. I'm assuming it's chlorine.
Right.
So, like I'm now applying the kit incorrectly.
I think that's honestly, I wish I can give you pushback, but it's a sound. It's sound. Like the whole thought, the premise is sound. I don't disagree with you. I hate to say it that way because I was actually kind of hoping to play the other side of the fence, but I'm having a hard time finding the other side.
Yeah, well, they had a hard time finding the other side too, and nevertheless, to say we did the scenario. And then there was a third thing that I got pushback on, and this one is a little bit more of an operational gray area. So you may be able to find some pushback on it.
Okay.
Right? So these kits were created less for us as firefighters and more for industrial responders. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally.
We just kind of adopted them.
Right.
There are parts in the kit that as a first responder, I would probably never, ever, ever want to use. Perfect example is the packing nut gland. Taking the valve stem apart and replacing and then putting it back in. I'm never going to do that. I'm going to throw a bonnet on it and call it a day. Like,
yeah, totally.
I'm not looking to save the cylinder. The cylinder isn't my cylinder. The chlorine isn't my chlorine. I don't really care if it's functional when I'm done. So is it important? We have a kit. We're supposed to know the entire kit. Is it reasonable that they show knowledge and proficiency on things that we tell them you're never going to do that? Or I don't ever use that drift pin like that.
See, that's a tough one.
That's
a much tougher one because I would say that the bonnet works and it works for everything.
Right.
Putting those drift pins and slamming that thing in there and correcting all types of what if scenarios gets to the point where I'm kind of a believer in the teacup only holds so much tea.
Yes.
And if you keep pouring more and more stuff into it, you're eventually going to run it over and you're just not going to remember this shit anymore. So what I would like to say, I would say that we test to reality.
Which is
bonnet.
Bonnet and the sidewall.
And the sidewall patch plug, whatever the hell that thing is, that little butterfly thing that they put on the side. Now, I would hope, and you hope that your recruitment is going this way, is that the guy goes, no, I want to do it all. By all means, because I've gone through every single one, so nothing's going to be surprising me. But if you're a minimum Marty, then yeah, you're going to get through the operation. The point is, can you put this thing to bed? It doesn't mean that you need to have every trick in the card in the book under your belt. I don't think you need to sign off to that level. Right.
Yeah, like I did not expect somebody to throw a drift pin in the fusible plug.
Right.
Right, like I'm never going to ask somebody to do that, so why am I training on it? However, I did make sure they knew what it was and what its function is. I felt like it was important, not necessarily for operating purposes, but more for, and this is terminology, and for when other people ask us what something is, right? I always like to think that every person going through HazMat 1 is going to become an instructor. And that when they're asked a question, they should be able to either get the information or have enough intelligence to say, I don't know, let me get back to you, right? Those are usually
Right.
the only two answers we give is the answer or I don't know, let me get back to you. And if somebody is from a class, a student is starting to pull out pieces and like, what's this, what's this, what's this, at our level of training, I don't think every answer should be, oh, geez, I don't know. Let me get back to it. It's like, well, you're teaching me this.
You're the expert.
Right. You're the expert. You don't know what this is? Like, at least enough to be like, oh, Chief, that's a drift pin. We would use it if the fusible plug went, but that's not the scenario. We're just going to go ahead and put the bonnet on.
All right. So then let me throw the other side of that, because now Minimum Marty is there and he's like, well, I don't need to know it. I'm not going to spend time on this. Fine. I do think that he has to know, like you said, the terminology. So if he's working with a guy like, let's say me, that does know all the parts and pieces and stuff like that, and I go, we're going to do a drift pin and we're going to drive into the thing, and the guys look at me like I got three heads. He has no idea what I'm even saying. Then we're not speaking the same language anymore. You don't have to know the operation.
But you need, and then that. So your opinion, I brought in that. And I said, okay, hold on a second. Yes, we have this kit. Yes, it's on the rig. And we now have a tool on the rig. You should at least know what it is because it could be used for something else. And the prime example of that is, do you remember the it seemed like a freaking 100-foot cylinder that was laying on the side of the road in Brooklyn that one time?
Yes.
And it was this really crazy-ass valve that was square, and it was leaking from someplace, and we were going to try to apply the chlorine kit to this to see if we could stop this natural gas, huge natural gas cylinder. And I'm like, well, if I only know the tools that I think I'm going to use, then I don't have them to be able to think outside the box in the future.
Right. And there's a tool. Well, I'm not going to say there's a tool for every job because there's not. But, a tool has a specific job. It doesn't mean the tool only can be used for that job. Like, I can use a wrench as a hammer.
Yes.
It's just not optimal for it. And so we've taken quite a bit of our tools and expanded their capabilities. Capping propane tanks with an A kit. Mm-hmm. Yes, it can be done. Like we have actually a specific rig for that. We have you can the jack, the spike jack.
The spike
we've
jacks.
Modified. Things, and we actually after that cylinder that Mike's talking about, those chains on the A kit are only 6 feet long, maybe 5.5, 6 feet long, or something like that.
Something like that.
We actually now carry like 20-foot extensions just for that, because if you think about that, if I have a huge long cylinder and I just want to cap the end, think of it like an SCBA cylinder. That's what it was, but it was like seriously 15 feet long.
It was huge.
It was huge. And what we were going to do is we were going to extend the chains and basically just make a huge A kit on its side. And that was the plan. And that's not in the books.
No.
So you can't even test them scenario-based for that thing. That just comes down to the guy looking in that box, chewing on those pieces and saying, what else can I do with that? But the problem is that the majority, I'm not going to say that. I don't want to say that because it's kind of negative, but it's an exceptional person that really says, I'm going to go outside the box. I'm going to make this thing hum.
Right.
That's hard.
How can I put different pieces together? And I think when you're in a very specialized company like HazMat, because I am sure without a doubt that rescue companies, which we're not talking about ambulances, I'm talking about like the cream of the crop, the SOC, the rescue, they understand every tool, whether they think they're going to use it ever or not.
And in every perversion of it.
And in every moderation, every way, they know how to. They're thinking about how to do it if they're hanging on a rope. They're thinking about how to do it if they're in a hole. Like there is just, if you are okay with just the basic, then maybe this isn't for you. But I think it's important to know and have an understanding of every piece of equipment that you have, even if it's going to be outside your scope of operation.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the HazMat Guys.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at The HazMat Guys, and take a moment to call our comment hotline at 843-628-1484.
And we are always looking forward to your feedback about information or interesting incidents that you were a part of, so send us a note at feedback@thehazmatguys.com.
Remember, guys, don't just get on the job, get into the job.